It's that time of year. The days are getting shorter. You're getting Christmas cards in the mail with little snowy landscapes or cute reindeer or maybe a generic family photo of some people you didn't want a photo of. And it's all so cozy. But if you have the internet, you've seen some bizarre Christmas photos involving frogs with guns, children baked into pies, dead birds. And I'm sure you've wondered, what are these? Are these memes? What does this frog stabbing another frog have to do with anything? Well, that's because in the Victorian era, the vibe of Christmas wasn't about matching pajamas, and it was more about fever dreams. I'm talking about sinister clowns branding people with hot pokers, terrifying imagery with the words, "May yours be a joyous Christmas," written underneath. They pop up on Twitter and Reddit every year, usually captioned with things with, "What is going on here?" Let's be real, they're top tier meme fodder, because they are completely unhinged. But the Victorians weren't trying to make memes. They weren't trying to be edgy. To them, a giant potato with human legs walking through the snow as a Christmas greeting made perfect sense. So, spooky people, let's put down our eggnog and let's talk about the golden age of Christmas cards and why it was the stuff of nightmares. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with another disturbing story. This is a disturbing Christmas story. Before we get to today's story, let's make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like, share, and comment on this video for the algorithm. To our eyes, Victorian Christmas cards seem bizarre. We think of the Victorian era as a sentimental and warm era, like a Dickens novel. But the greeting cards that were shared in the late 1800s were dark, violent, and grotesque. Major publishers printed millions of cards showing images like dead robins with rigor mortis, children being boiled in teapots. And it was somehow an honest reflection of the Victorian world. To them, Christmas wasn't just happy. It was a time of survival where death was common, nature was harsh, and their dark humor was all they had to cope. Which I guess is kind of like now, right? We rely on our dark humor to cope with our times now. The card's chaotic absurdity was a response to a difficult and uncertain age. The strange context of Victorian greeting cards is a result of many things, from postal reform to industrial change. Before 1840, the British postal system was expensive and complex. Postage was paid by the recipient and was based on the number of sheets and distance, which discouraged people from sending mail. The Uniform Penny Post in 1840 changed everything. It standardized the cost to 1 penny paid by the sender via the stamp for any distance within the UK. This change made communication affordable for middle and working classes and created a new market for the greeting card. Yeah, you can blame the English for why you have to send Christmas cards to people. However, because it was affordable, it made the obligation of writing personal letters a time-consuming chore for people who were too busy to do any of that sort of nonsense. Sir Henry Cole found himself too busy to write Christmas letters in 1843, so he commissioned the first commercial Christmas card from artist John Calcott Horsley as a time-saving solution. The card showed scenes of charity on the sides, but the center panel showed the Cole family raising a toast, including a child being given wine. It caused a moral outcry from the temperance movement, who condemned the promotion of underage drinking. This controversy made the Christmas card a commercial and controversial object from the start. It showed that these cards were a space where social critique and domestic life could collide, setting the precedent for what would become our weird Victorian cards. Yes, sending Christmas cards with images of dead birds is confusing and morbid. But to the Victorians, it had specific meanings. The robin was a symbol for the postman, nicknamed the Robin due to their red uniforms, making the bird a messenger on the card. The image of a dead, frozen bird was a trigger for sympathy, a valued emotion in the Victorian era. We don't really have that nowadays, do we? It was a visual reminder of the popular ballad The Babes in the Wood, where robins cover the bodies of 2 dead children. The dead birds served as a memento mori and a moral reminder to remember the poor and the freezing during the affluent holiday season. Dead wrens on a Victorian card weren't supposed to be macabre. They were a symbol of good luck, rooted in the ancient Celtic tradition of Wren Day, St. Stephen's Day on December 26th. In folklore, the wren was the king of all birds. On Wren Day, people would ritually hunt and parade the bird's corpse to purge the community of bad luck from the year and welcome the new year. Sending a card with a dead wren was a way to perform this ritual by proxy, bestowing the associate good fortune and wishing the recipient good cheer on the new year. Here's a dead bird. The nursery rhyme, Who Killed Cock Robin, adds a third layer of meaning. This Victorian nursery rhyme depicts a sparrow murdering a robin and the subsequent animal funeral. Cards showing bird funerals were illustrations of this story. The Victorians Victorians used this pop culture reference to acknowledge death in a stylized way, making it seem like a fable rather than a harsh reality. All of these dead birds also reflect the Victorian interest in taxidermy. Yes, of course the Victorians were interested in taxidermy. Preserving dead animals in human-like poses was a popular art and hobby, and you thought your friends had weird hobbies. A card with a dead bird was like paper taxidermy, a lasting preserved image that captured the quietness of death. The dead bird symbolized serious sides of holiday rituals. The human-like frog embodied the chaotic and often violent humor of city dwellers in the Victorian era. I'm talking about the notorious frog murder cards. These cards, dating back from the 1800s, depict frogs harming other frogs, like this one depicting a frog stabbing another frog in the stomach with a dagger. The frog victim falls back, dying while the perpetrator flees with a sack marked 2,000, presumably pounds. The caption, in a cheerful font, reads, "A Merry Christmas to you." It's probable that this image and others like it are a stock picture from some fable or cartoon that was repurposed by the printer to make a quick profit during the holidays. The difference between the violent picture and the cheerful text is an accidental piece of dark humor. But the image might be a scene from the nursery rhyme, "Frog he would a-wooing go," where the frog's journey ends with him being eaten by a duck. The rhyme warns that stepping outside your social class leads to death. The murder card escalates the violence by adding crime and greed to the frog's world. The Victorian era followed Darwin's Origin of the Species, and it was unsettled by the idea that humans were closely related to animals. Victorian art often used animals with human characteristics, anthropomorphism, to suggest that people were not much more than animals in fancy clothes, which I think we all agree with. A frog robbing a bank represents human greed. It's implied that the civilized actions of bankers are like the predatory instincts of a pond creature. The cold-blooded frog, dressed as a gentleman, fresh from the mud, is a perfect symbol to remind people that their animal nature is always just beneath their human appearance. Although it was a great subject for satire, the frog also had symbolic meanings. In medieval times, frogs were linked to sin and Egyptian plagues. Victorian-era scholars associated frogs with resurrection because they believed the animals died in winter and were reborn from the slime in the spring. Scholars also note that Renaissance art used the frog to symbolize Christ's resurrection. The frog's connection to rebirth, especially its cycle of dying, hibernating in winter, and returning in the spring, made it a symbol for the new year. So these frog murder cards combine several Victorian interests: evolution with animals acting like people, theology with the resurrection symbolism, and satire, making fun of modern life. The violence on the card is just the dark humor or punchline. The most disturbing category of Victorian cards involves a depiction of children in varying states of peril, torture, or consumption. Images of children being boiled in pots, baked into pies, or stuffed into sacks by St. Nicholas or Krampus dismantle the modern assumption of the Victorian cult of the innocent child. These cards show dark humor about children. One in a teapot or baked into food is certainly dark. We can debate about how humorous that is. Putting in a child in a teapot connects to the literary nonsense of Alice in Wonderland, suggesting absurdity and containment. But it also hints at the dark side, the Victorian idea of the bad child and the fairy tale threat of being eaten, like in, for example, Hansel and Gretel. This was a way to scare children into behaving. It was a threat or a joke among adults about parenting. The image of a child as food is grotesque humor like Swift's A Modest Proposal, violating the taboo of cannibalism. Because child death was so common, this dark humor of gallows humor was a way for Victorians to cope with the reality and the horror of losing children. They also liked to create anthropomorphic vegetables. Cards depicting onion people or potatoes with faces were popular. These images were often captioned with groan-inducing puns like, "May you have a peeling Christmas," showing a fascination with root vegetables and eating. The onion person is a grotesque figure, a human soul trapped in a vegetable body. It shows the Victorian love of novelty for novelty's sake. Same with a potato with a face. It's funny because, well, it's weird. Our modern Santa Claus is purely benevolent, but the Victorian St. Nicholas was still evolving and was often associated with his unfriendly friends. In Germanic traditions, St. Nicholas was accompanied by Krampus, or similar dark figures who punished naughty children. Cards showing St. Nicholas stuffing a child into a sack are showing off this judgment. They serve as a reminder that the holiday reward is contingent on good behavior. The joy of the season was balanced by the terror of judgment, and Victorians seem to embrace these two sides. The nice list required the existence of a naughty list, and the punishment for the latter was bad. We've also learned that clowns are creepy, and the creepy clown has become a horror trope, like It or Art the Clown. However, Victorians didn't have It or Art the Clown. When Victorians put clowns on Christmas cards, they were not attempting to be scary, they were showing off pantomime. These clowns would often be brandishing red-hot pokers or assaulting police officers. The Christmas pantomime, or panto, was the dominant form of holiday entertainment in Victorian Britain. They didn't have the internet back then. It was a raucous, chaotic, theatrical tradition. The central character of the harlequinade section of the panto was the clown. The Victorian clown was not a gentle figure. He was a trickster and an agent of chaos. He was a violent anarchist. His standard prop was a red-hot poker, which he used to brand sausages, steal food, and burn the backsides of authority figures like policemen and shopkeepers. Oh, that rascal. So a card showing a clown holding a branding iron near a child or a policeman was a direct reference to this family entertainment. It was slapstick comedy, exaggerated and funny. It represented overturning social order. The Feast of the Fools, or the Lord of Misrule tradition, where authority is mocked for a day. The clown on the card was the sender participating in this act. Sending a card of a clown attacking a policeman was a safe way to mock authority during the holidays. The creepiness that we get from these clowns today is because of the context of our long history of being terrified of clowns. There's an economic reason for the weirdness of Victorian cards. The driving force behind the explosion of these designs was the printing technology that had developed and a competition between these publishers. The technology that enabled these cards was chromolithography. The process involved using multiple stone plates, one for each color, to build up a complex, vibrant image. It allowed for the mass production of art that previously needed to be hand-painted. By the 1880s, the process had become sophisticated and relatively cheap. This meant that the market was saturated. To stand out, publishers didn't rely on simple images of holly and ivy. They needed something that was novel. De La Rue and Company was a major player that entered the market in the 1870s. They were known for high mechanical excellence and fertility of ideas. The cards featuring children and classical figures. Marcus Ward & Co. was known for hiring high alt designers like Walter Crane and Kate Greenaway, attempting to elevate the card into a piece of art. Raphael Tuck and Sons was possibly the most prolific, and they were known for their royal warrants and their massive outputs of designs, including many of the trick or novelty cards. Hilda Schmeyer and Faulkner used to have competitions offering large cash prizes for new card design, which drove artists to create increasingly elaborate and unusual concepts to catch judges' eyes. In 1894, art critic Gleason White published Christmas cards and their chief designers, which was a history on the industry. He noted that the monsters of Nightmareland and the pictures of accidents that had permeated the genre. White's analysis suggests that by the 1890s, the weird card had become a recognized subgenre. The demand for novelty and surprise had pushed designers to the edge of logic. If the card featuring a monkey painting a dog sold well, the market dictated that next year's card had to be even stranger. Maybe insects dancing in the moonlight. These also became collectibles. Victorians collected these cards in albums. They became conversation pieces. The image of a dead bird or a fighting frog was visually appealing in a way that a generic snowflake was not. So all of this shock value was a marketing strategy. Now, I know you're asking, these Victorian cards are creepy. Why would they send death for Christmas? Why would they joke about boiling children? And the answer is because the Victorians didn't live in a sanitized world. They lived in cities choked with smog, in a time where a simple infection could kill someone in a few days, in a society where the butchery of animals was visible in the street. They didn't hide from these realities. They incorporated it into their play, their art, and Christmas. The dead bird was not an insult. It was a ritual prayer for luck and a sentimental acknowledgement of winter's cruelty. The fighting frog was a mirror of human greed and a nod to rebirth. The boiled child was a nonsense joke that diffused the terrifying reality of child mortality through absurdity. The violent clown was a beloved theatrical anarchist who allowed people to laugh at authority. These cards are artifacts of a culture that looked into the darkness of Christmas time and chose to laugh, to ritualize, and to satirize. They represent a Gothic sensibility in the truest sense, a blending of the beautiful and the grotesque, the sacred and the profane. By sending these images, the Victorians were creating their own Christmas spirit, embracing a holiday that was robust enough to contain the full spectrum of the human experience, from the birth of Jesus to the frozen death of the Wren. In a strange way, our modern holiday has become safe and happy, and we have somewhat lost this rich, dark, human complexity to this holiday. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like, share, and comment for the algorithm for this video. You can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok. My username is The Spooky Lawyer. If there is a disturbing story you would like me to cover, leave a comment and tell me about it, or send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a link in the description of this video and in my bio to buy me a coffee, so you can buy me a coffee. Or you can become a member of this channel. For $1.99, you can get access to exclusive content, including exclusive videos, and access to my videos before they're made public. Thank you for considering this. You can also support me by clicking like, sharing, commenting on, and watching my videos. And I really do appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.